Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, share our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 92, Samson He Denied Her. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell calls to tell Fran that he made a horrible mistake 6 months ago, and she jumps to the obvious conclusion. He regrets taking back the thing. Unfortunately, he meant that he miscalculated her tax withholdings and owes her a refund. Fran then decides to join Cece for jury duty, and they both get picked to serve as jurors on the Vincenzo trial. Instead of taking Fran's mind off her disappointing relationship with Maxwell, the trial makes it very difficult for Fran to separate her personal experiences from the evidence, since the trial is about whether Vincenzo's live-in housekeeper or maid cut his hair off after he told her that he loved her and then took it back. Fran maintains Kiki's innocence even after Kiki admits to the attack on the stand and under oath. Meanwhile, Sylvia has moved into the Sheffield home as the temporary nanny while Fran is away, and shall we say, she leaves the Sheffields hungry for more. Food, that is. After the trial, Fran returns home and tells Maxwell that she now understands why he took back the thing, and that she's not angry with him anymore, only to learn that Vincenzo convinced the prosecutor to drop the charges and has married his housekeeper. Bernadette, do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to the office in scene 1?
Yeah. So we open up in the office. Niles is vigorously dusting something on Maxwell's desk when Fran comes in. Oh my God, Mr. Sheffield called me from the limo. He said he made a big mistake 6 months ago and wants to talk to me about it. Niles says 6 months. Fran says Paris. Niles says plane. Fran says told me that he loved me. Niles says took it back. And then both of them together say mistake. Then they start dancing. Mistake, like he made a big mistake, dancing together, high five. And then Maxwell walks in. And Maxwell asks Niles to leave because he'd like the opportunity to talk with Fran. And Fran and Niles kind of look at each other, and Niles kind of takes his feather duster and what's the word for it? I mean, he throws it over his shoulder. Yeah, but making sure it's very jaunty, it spins in the air and Fran catches it.
It's a bouquet.
Almost like a
toss.
bouquet. That is
Yes.
true. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So of course, anticipation is high.
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell sits at his desk. He wants to. He made a terrible mistake. He wants to make it up to her right now. And she's in her classic position, sitting on his desk. And she's just okay, just hold on 1 second. And she picks up the phone and she calls Sylvia. Sylvia answers. We're sitting down to eat. Can it wait a sec? And sitting down to eat. What is it? And Fran just asks her to hold on, listen in. And Maxwell's kind of puzzled, why has Fran called Sylvia? But he goes ahead and he explains, he was talking with his accountant. It turns out he withheld more taxes from Fran than he should have, so he owes her a big refund. And immediately hear that Sylvia has hung up on the line.
Yup.
And so Fran's incensed. She's like, you lured me in here, with that, and you call my mother? And he's like, you're the one who called your mother. And she points at him. Nobody likes a finger pointer.
Exactly.
And then again, he's like, why are you so upset? He's trying to figure out what's going on. And again, Fran's just very upset because she expected him to, again, talk about the big mistake 6 months ago,
Yep.
about him taking back that he loved her. And again, so while she's saying all this, she eventually does ask him, so how much in terms of the refund? He hands her the check. She looks at it, happy about it, but then she's like, ooh, but then moving on. How could you be so insensitive?
Right.
And he's saying, well, I thought you understood why I took it back. And she says, no, I pretended to because I wanted to appear reasonable. I thought it would be a turn on.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, Cece walks in, and she's upset because she's just been summoned to be on a jury. And she even mutters, that's the last time I vote.
Yeah.
And Fran kind of cuts in because, Cece is explaining, she has to do this. And Fran's like, oh, maybe I'll just go with her. And Cece's like, you can't just go. It's not a supercuts.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, oh, I have a drawer full of those summons. Like, I've got nothing else to do.
There's
Maxwell,
nothing keeping me here.
yeah, and Maxwell's like frustrated. He's like, when will you ever forgive me? I think at this point, Cece's already left. And Fran says to him, it starts with N and ends with A. And Maxwell has like this look on his face, like he's trying to figure out a word that starts with N and ends with A. And Fran distinctly pronounces never.
Yep.
And that's the scene. Do you have anything you'd like to add to it?
I guess I just want to comment on when Fran calls Sylvia and, Sylvia answers and her mouth is clearly full of food. And she says, what is it, darling? We're just sitting down to eat. And Fran's like, oh, can't that wait? And Sylvia's like, no. And Fran's like, well, I think you're going to want to hear this. And she tosses the phone towards Maxwell basically and says, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very amusing the way that interaction unfolded.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I wanted to add.
Okay. Can you take us to the Vincenzo trial?
Sure. So Fran and Cece are sitting next to each other, waiting for, I guess, jury selection to start. And Fran has this epiphany. Oh my God, this is the Vincenzo trial. Oh, I just got to get on this jury. And she starts like rummaging through her bag. He is on the cover of every romance novel. And she like shows Cece a book. And she asks, and sorry, Cece's like, oh, and Fran's like, oh, do you know him? And Cece's like, no, you read? Which, okay, cool, Cece.
No, but she clearly then has kind of a self smirk, like, ooh, I burned her.
Yeah, exactly. She's proud of herself. Yeah. And so one of the attorneys comes over and asks juror number two, who we find out is Fran, about her form. And she's asked, under marital status, does it say divorced? And Fran says, no, disgusted. And he just kind of looks at her and then he's like, and you are how old? She's like, 29. And he looks totally disbelievingly. And she's like, well, who's on trial here anyway?
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much the scene.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything or take us back to the office?
I'll take us back to the office. Maxwell's at his desk. Niles knocks on the door, comes in, asks Maxwell whether he wants the good news, like he has good news and bad news. And Maxwell says, well, good news first. And so Niles explains, Miss Babcock got picked as a juror and will be, off work while the the trial's in session. And Maxwell's like, and how is that good news for me? Maxwell says, why is that good news for me? And Niles says, not everything is about you, sir.
Correct.
And then, okay, the bad news, Miss Fine got picked as well. And Maxwell's like, oh, no, that could be good for her, new people, change of scenery. And Niles is like, keep her from killing you, for breaking her heart again. And yeah, that's why Maxwell's on board with this.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell says, okay, well, just find a temporary replacement for her. And of course, at this moment, who walks in but Sylvia? And I have to say, I think it's important. She's dressed as Fran is like in the opening theme song with the red dress.
Mm-hmm. It's like a red suit,
like
jacket and skirt.
Mm-hmm, with like a faux fur trim on the collar. And she's like, say hello to your new nanny. And then she comes over. And again, she's dressed like Fran, and she decides to hop on the corner of the desk as Fran would.
Yup.
And the desk buckles underneath her. Yeah. That's never addressed later, by the way, with the desk.
Nope.
But Sylvie's unfazed by this. She's
She
just
looks
still
a little
smiling.
embarrassed.
Yeah, but
still
she's still
smiling.
smiling. It's not like she hops up immediately and like gets flustered or anything. So
Correct.
yes, so the scene we get introduced to, oh, Sylvie is going to be Miss Fine,
Yup.
Mrs. Fine. But yeah,
Correct.
would you like to add anything, or would you take us back to the courthouse?
I'll take us back to the courthouse. So now we're back in the courtroom, and the bailiff is announcing, hear ye, this court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Jerry Moran presiding. All rise. Everyone stands up. The judge comes in and he says to everyone, be seated. They start to sit. And he said, you're all out. I didn't say Simon Says. And he and the bailiff laugh about it because he never gets tired of that joke. And so everyone sits down, and he, tells the lawyers, proceed. And this woman gets up and she says that the people call Vincenzo to the stand. And so the guy who is Vincenzo gets up and goes to the witness stand. And Fran reacts because he's a very good looking guy. I think it worth describing him. Do you agree?
Yes.
So he's tall, dark, and handsome. He has like shoulder length, straight brown hair, nice cheekbones. He's a good looking guy. He's in a suit, if I recall correctly. And Fran is drawn to him and she stands up. The judge says to sit down, and Vincenzo starts to sit. He's like, not you, juror number 2, because Fran has been standing trying to get closer to Vincenzo. So Fran sits down and comments to Cece, who's sitting next to her. He yelled at me, but look at her. She pushed her chair up nice and close. The court reporter is moved up to hear what's going to be said. So on the other side of Cece is another juror who asks if she minds if he takes off her shoes because his feet are a little moist. And Cece doesn't answer him, but instead comments to herself that I am the meat in an idiot sandwich. So turning our attention back to the proceedings, shall we say, the prosecutor asks Vincenzo to tell us what happened the night you were attacked. And so he paints a picture that he was asleep and his housekeeper, Kiki, was hovering over his bed and he thought that he was dreaming. But then that woman just chopped it all off. And there's everyone's shocked. And Fran turns to Cece and says, and that's why they don't allow female mohels. And so the prosecutor asks Vincenzo, did you experience emotional distress as a result of the attack? He's like, of course. God knows if it'll ever grow back. That malafeminina, my career is ruined. Look what she did to me. And he pulls his hair off and it turns out it's a wig and he's totally bald. Look what she did to me. The judge leans over. The judge is also bald. I like it. Lose the earring. It's a little too Mr. Clean. And so the prosecutor asks Vincenzo, well, why would Kiki want to attack you? And he says, I don't know. In fact, I told her that I loved her. And Fran, in her stage whisper to Cece says, give her the chair, pass it down. And so we switch back to the courtroom proceedings, and the prosecutor turns Vincenzo over to the other attorney, who says, Vincenzo, could you tell the court what you did after you told Miss Hanson that you loved her? And he says, I took it back. And Fran, I think she gets up again, call for a mistrial. That woman is 100% absolutely not guilty.
Yeah, she gasps when he says, I took it back. And then says that.
Her whole reaction is just overblown. And the judge looks at her and goes, shh. And she's like, sorry, and sits back down.
Yep.
Do you have anything you'd like to add, or do you want to go into the kitchen?
I will take us back to the kitchen
Thank you.
where we have Niles, Brighton, Gracie, and Sylvia. And Sylvia's at the table, and it looks like the others are kind of cleaning up. And Sylvia announces, "Okay, kids, let's play a new game. Let's make Sylvia a snack." And Brighton says, "We just played Let's Make Sylvia Dinner." And Sylvia's like, "Yeah, but I won."
Mhm.
So then there's like a bottle of nail polish at the table, and Sylvia asks, like, "Who wants to paint my nails?" And Gracie says, "I do," like excited, and she comes over. But then Sylvia like puts her foot up on the table,
Mhm.
and and she's like, "Okay, start with the big one." And Gracie's kind of like taken aback, like, "Oh, they're all big."
Yep.
And then but she sits down. and then Maggie walks in, and she's on the phone with someone talking about, "Oh, so is he cute?" Like all this kind of stuff. And the conversation appears as if she's on the phone with a friend. And I think it's Brighton who says, "Gidget, get off the phone. We're waiting for a phone call from Fran." And Maggie's like, "This is Fran."
Mhm.
Um, and so she hands the phone off to Sylvia. And before she does, though, like, Sylvia holds up a hoop earring to Maggie and says, "My hole closed up. Can you push it through?"
Yep.
And like Maggie takes the earring, kind of disgusted. So is everybody. Um,
Mhm.
and then so Sylvia starts talking with Fran, and we only hear Sylvia's side of the conversation. And so Sylvia tells Fran, they don't hang people anymore. And then obviously Fran says something because Sylvia's like, "Oh, well, he should rot in hell. He's guilty as sin." And
Mhm.
at this point, Maxwell has come in, and he's like, "I didn't think she could talk about the trial." And Sylvia says, "She's talking about you." And
Yep.
so Maxwell tries to get the phone so he can talk with her. And Sylvia's like, "She doesn't want to talk to you." And anyway, does she hang up at that point, or is she
Yeah.
still on the phone?
Yeah,
Okay, she
she
hangs
hangs
up.
up with Fran.
And
And she
she
doesn't say
mentioned,
goodbye, which is
yeah,
always something I find strange on television shows.
yeah. And she makes some type of comment about how she's fragile and delicate.
How women
Oh, how
can't
women
play.
are.
You can't play with a woman's emotions.
Oh yeah, they're so fragile and delicate. And then she immediately like turns to Gracie and says, "There's no nail on that toe. Paint the skin." And
Uh-huh.
then back on, we hear uh, Brighton saying, "Oh, the trial's on the news." And for the first time ever, we see like a little portable TV on the counter. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've ever seen that before. I could be wrong. But again, we hear about the trial, and the announcer saying how, Vincenzo told, his employee he loved her, and then he took it back. And Niles looks at, Mr. Sheffield, because Maxwell had hoped that a trial would take Fran's mind off of their situation. Apparently
Correct.
not. And after hearing this, Maxwell kind of makes the comment of like, "Oh, which arm tingles when you're about to have a heart attack?" And Niles is like, "Oh, you're so vain, sir. Like, it's not as if everything, relates back to you or whatever." And then on the news, we see, all the jurors were stone faced during the testimony, except for juror number 2 had to be physically restrained. And we see a courtroom sketch of clearly Fran lunging with Cece holding her back.
Correct.
So yes, Maxwell's hope that this trial would distract Fran, yeah, it's not coming true. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
No, I do not.
Okay, can you take us back to the courthouse?
Sure. So now it's another day of trial. And Fran and Cece are again sitting together, and Fran is like digging through her bag, pulling out all kinds of snacks and asking Cece, hold this, just whatever, keep like digging and handing things to Cece repeatedly. And she's saying, oh, just look at that poor girl. Because we see that Kiki, the housekeeper, is being sworn in. And Fran says, see, that is what happens when a man tells you that he loves you and then he takes it back. Any woman in her position would have done the exact same thing. Meanwhile, like Cece's arms are now full of like Fran's various snackages. And Cece's like, what are you looking for? And Fran's like, my Dexatrim. Well, Cece's done. She starts putting things back in Fran's bag. So we then turn to the testimony, and Kiki Hansen is now on the stand, and she's asked by the prosecutor. The prosecutor says to her, you claim not to have a key to Vincenzo's room, yet as his live-in maid, you must have had total access to every room in the home. And Fran comments to Cece, ugh, this is so low. They're playing the domestic help card. Prosecutor then asks, can you tell us how your fingerprints got onto People's Exhibit number 6? And she unfurls a bag, and in it is a pair of scissors. And Kiki's like, I don't know. Well, how did you get those cuts on your hands? I don't know. And Fran's like, oh, she's just so obviously innocent.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecutor continues, investigators uncovered a size 8 Manolo Blahnik stiletto heel print at the scene. In your deposition, you claim that you had never owned such an ugly pair of shoes. How do you explain this photograph? And she picks up a huge, like, blown up photograph of Kiki wearing, obviously white shoes, to which Fran comments, well, it's obviously been doctored. I mean, those shoes are white. The crime took place after Labor Day. There goes the whole timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge interjects, there's a voice in here that's really irritating me. And then the bailiff chimes in, hey, shut up over there.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecutor continues, you lied about these shoes. You lied about being in his room that night. And you lied about using those scissors to deform him, didn't you? And Kiki's like, I would never hurt Vincenzo. I knew him when he was just Bernie Schwartzberg. Anyone else would have killed him. All I did was cut his hair. And Cece's like, did you hear that? And Fran's like, I don't believe it. He's Jewish. And she smiles and waves at him.
Mm-hmm.
And he like tosses his wig back. It's just a very familiar scene.
Well, because at first when Kiki reveals she knew him when he was just Bernie Schwartzberg, he kind of like slinks down in his chair a little bit.
No, that's a good point.
And then when Fran kind of like, oh, he's Jewish, then he kind of like puffs up a little and flips his what we know now as a wig.
Correct. Thank you for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, but what's funny too is like, again, the snacks that were being pulled out of her bag were like full size like Butterfingers, a whole can of like Pringles, like full size stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, like, again, how did she get that in? But anyway.
Right. And also, when did she think she was going to eat it?
Yeah. Can I take us to the office?
Please.
Okay. So Maxwell again is at his desk. Niles comes in kind of furtively, and Maxwell's like, Sylvia's been calling you for the past 10 minutes. And Niles is like, she was calling from the tub, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And then Maxwell inquires, where's lunch? And Niles starts pulling various things out of his pockets. So like the bread, the mustard, like the different components to a sandwich.
Uh-huh.
And he explains when when you start kind of putting the ingredients together, she can smell it immediately. So he like starts rapidly trying to like get it all together. And again, we hear from the distance Olga calling Niles, and he's like again trying to put it together quickly. She's on to us, sir. Mm-hmm. And Sylvia appears at the door.
What else does he say?
What does he say?
He says,
like try to eat that. Don't swallow.
Don't bother to chew it. Just swallow it whole.
Yeah. She's on to us, sir. Sylvia shows up in the doorway in a bathtub or bathrobe saying, do I smell dry cotto salami with sweet honey mustard on a Kaiser bun or
Mm-hmm.
roll? And so she comes over and she takes it, and Maxwell kind of says, I really wanted that.
Mm-hmm.
But she's gone, and Niles comments, if Jimmy Hoffa had, what was it,
A
a
corned beef
Reuben,
sandwich.
a corned beef sandwich, they would have found him in a week.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, is there anything you'd like to add to that scene?
Only that I think is my favorite scene in this episode.
Really? Interesting.
Because I just love the physical comedy of Niles coming in and just like pulling the components of a sandwich out of his various pockets and like taking Maxwell's letter opener to spread the mustard. And sorry, I really like that scene.
Okay. Would you like to take us to the jury room?
Sure. So the jury is now in the jury room, and they've clearly like filled out, like they've done like a vote on paper, and they're pulling him out. Guilty, yes. Guilty, yeah. And one not guilty. And everyone turns to Fran. And the guy who, I guess, the guy who had been sitting next to Cece before says, okay, come on, lady. What part of this exactly is it that you don't understand? The confession under oath or the neighbor's video that showed her doing it? You ever hear of guilty as sin? And he's like leaning over her. And she's like, ever heard of arid extra dry? Well, Cece then interjects, all right, Nanny, fine. If you don't vote guilty, I'm going to swing you by the head like a dead cat. I have been stuck in that hotel room with you for 8 days. I'm singing myself to sleep with a horse is a horse, of course, of course. And like, you can tell that she's at her wit's end. And Fran's like, well, excuse me. The man told her that he loved her and then he took it back. Do you know what that does to a person? Hasn't anybody ever driven anyone here to commit an insane act? And this little prim and proper old lady says, I can't say that has ever happened. And Fran's like, oh, so your kids, they call you a lot? No, but they see you at least once a week, once a month, and only if I beg. Oh, it's not my son, it's that cow he married. Sometimes I just want to shake her. Not guilty. And everyone's like, no. And Cece turns back to Fran's like, could it be that you're just a little sensitive to the shrew maid because you have some fantasy of ending up with your employer yourself? And Fran's like, let she who is without fantasy cast the first stone. And for your information, I am completely able to separate myself from this case. And one of the other jurors is like, Miss, did you even listen to Vincenzo's reasons for taking back what he said? And I quote, Miss Hanson and I had feelings for each other, but I couldn't risk the romance. She was like a mother to my children. And Fran's like, but the kids adore me, her, me, her. And the juror continues, my children couldn't handle losing another mother if our relationship didn't work out. And the guy who'd been sitting next to Cece's like, the same thing happened to me when I was a little boy. And he's like starting to cry. He turns to Cece, tries to put his arm like on the back of her chair. You like a sensitive guy? And she's like, yes, I used to be one. And so Fran's like, so in other words, the reason he couldn't commit to her was that because he was so much in love with her, he was afraid that if he blew it, not only would it hurt the kids, but he would lose her forever. And that's why he took back the thing. And everyone, except for Fran and the little old lady in the jury room, is like, yes. And then the little old lady's like, what thing? And Cece and the other jurors are like, oh, shut up. And that's the scene. Do you want to add anything?
Nope.
All right. Would you like to take us to the kitchen?
Yes. So we're in the kitchen, and Brighton comes through the outside side door, and he has a bag. And he, again, is kind of like in a rush and looking around, trying to see if the coast is clear. And he goes to the counter, and he starts to pull out what we see as a sandwich, but Sylvia appears on the stairwell.
Yep.
And she's like, do I smell a Southwest barbecue grilled sandwich on sourdough with a side of string fries.
Shoestring fries.
Shoestring fries. And she's coming towards Brighton, and Brighton's like, can I have one little bite? And she's like, that's not sanitary. takes it. She's about to bite into it when Fran comes in through the side door, and she tells her mother to give that barbecue sandwich on sourdough with a side of shoestring fries back to the boy.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sylvia hands it back to Brighton. Brighton takes it, and he's like, "God bless you, Fran. Welcome home." And he leaves. Now Sylvia's kind of catching Fran up about what happened. While she was gone, Mr. Sheffield was pretty antisocial. He never came out of the office. And Fran kind of muses, "Oh, like Daddy. I wonder, like what that's about."
Right.
Bye, Ma. And so Sylvia leaves. And then Maxwell comes in, and he's kind of like a little wary, like thinks that she's gonna still be mad at him. And he's like, "Okay, like just to remind you, I've been living with your mother for a week, so I think I deserve some time off of my sentence."
Mm-hmm.
And Fran though is like, "Oh no, I understand, why you took back, I'm not angry anymore." And you know, uh, he's like, "Don't toy with me. I'm weak with hunger."
Mm-hmm.
And she beckons him, "Come here." And so they're hugging. And then, Frank kind of starts rubbing up and like rubbing his back. And then she says, "Now I'm toying with you."
Correct.
And then as they're still like hugging and stuff, they learn, is it Niles who
It's
comes
Niles.
in?
Yeah, Niles comes in.
It says, "Oh, like breaking news, Vincenzo, dropped the charges and married Kiki." And so upon hearing this, Fran starts to get angry again. Maxwell like holds on to her tight, and she's like, "Holding me tight won't help unless you lower your hands a bit."
Right.
So yeah, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Her exact line is, "If you think that holding me tight is going to get you out of this one, mister, well, you're just going to have to move your hands a little lower."
Yep.
That's all I wanted to add. So in the last scene, we hear we cut to what looks like an island, and it's, we hear Fran's voice reading. "Her alabaster skin was pressed against his taut, muscular body. Their lips met, and the two became one." I guess we start with Fran sitting and reading, and then we cut to this like fantasy scene, and we see Fran, and then we see a woman with dark curly hair, pressed up against Vincenzo. And Fran's like, "Hey, this is my fantasy." The woman pressed up against Vincenzo turns around, and we see it's Grandma Yetta. "But I lent you the book." And Yetta then turns to Vincenzo. "Now, let's go to the chapter where we're shipwrecked." And Vincenzo looks at the camera and says, "Oi."
Mm-hmm.
That's
Kind
that.
of pained.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's the episode.
That is the episode. Before we jump into our shticks, I have to say it. It didn't make sense.
No, it didn't. It was totally overly exaggerated and like just utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, because again, Cece is correct. You can't just like decide to show up for jury duty.
Right.
I would, and you can't interrupt like she did. Can't bring
Right.
all the snacks. But some of the things too are just like, okay, well, first of all, this is apparently over him getting his hair cut.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, if she cut his hair, unless she like used a razor, not the scissors shown, like it wouldn't be completely bald. Um, but second of all, like why would you have an 8-day trial on it?
Right.
Because this is supposedly a criminal trial because it's the people.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Um, like again, just I feel like everybody in the US at least has heard about the right to remain silent. So I don't know how they got a deposition of the witness unless she had a really crappy attorney who didn't
Of
advise
course,
her
I
of
mean,
rights.
I think she probably could have been like asked questions, but she would have probably said nothing.
Yeah, and that would have been an interrogation, not a deposition. But anyway, so
But
just the
also,
mechanics. Yeah,
sorry, just like it, again, none of it made any sense. But like, so like to your point about like if she cut his hair off with scissors, it would now be
hmm
perfectly smooth. But to me, like you're right. But then he went and shaved it off because it probably was cut funny, right?
Oh,
But like, wouldn't it have started to grow back? Like,
yeah, yeah.
also,
'Cause-
like, how could it like go to trial so quickly with her hand still having cuts from
Yeah,
allegedly from the scissors
yeah.
that she
But
cut his hair? Like,
timeline doesn't make sense. But also at the very end, where Fran's back at home, which implies that there was a verdict reached,
uh-huh.
and yet she now finds out from Niles that the charges are dropped.
Uh-huh.
That's not how that works.
Also, why would why would they be sequestered?
hmm Yeah.
Right? Like it just none of it made any sense.
Nope.
Also, Fran brought a copy of the Vincenzo book, one of the Vincenzo books with her.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, again, I know if I were one of the like attorneys, maybe the defense attorney, and I see that she's like drooling over this guy, has a book, I wouldn't want her on my jury.
I mean, even regardless, like, even if it got past that point, as soon as she like stood up to try to get closer to him, that
Yes.
seems like inappropriate behavior. Or her like,
Yep.
it's like saying, give her the chair, pass it down, and then
Yeah.
call for a mistrial. Like, it just makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, that also didn't make sense because a mistrial would just mean that prosecutor could try it again.
Right. Like,
She's not asking to dismiss the charges, you know? I don't know. There were just a lot of yeah, things that obviously we know the intent, right? We're trying to get a parallel between this situation and Maxwell and Fran so that Fran can have that epiphany at the end and like finally get it, understand why he took it back. But again, like how they went about it just makes no sense.
correct. Correct.
So
It's, yeah, I'm glad you wanted to open with that.
yeah, it doesn't make sense. The other thing I just kind of wanted to talk about generally is like how much they really lean into like Sylvia and food and all this kind of stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
like I'm like I don't know, again, it seemed a bit excessive to me. I know like one of your favorite scenes is the sandwich piece of it, but like they're just consistently like throughout the episode just really laying it on thick. And I also wonder like why couldn't they have said no? You know, like why were they under Sylvia's power in such a way?
Well, that part I can answer. Could you imagine trying to tell that woman no?
Yeah, but still, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. Um,
Yeah, no, I think you're right that they did go a little bit overboard with Sylvia and food. I just really think the comedic value of that scene with Niles just pulling the food out from all his different pockets is just so
mhm.
funny.
Well, what's so interesting is how does Fran have the power over her mother to get her to give up the sandwich back to Brighton?
That doesn't make any sense. You're right.
Yeah. So anyway,
But
um,
keep in mind the point of that scene, like at least that portion of that scene, was to show that Fran had the same magical superpower as her mother.
yes, in terms of being able to detect what exactly is in a sandwich.
Correct.
Yep. So, yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we jumped into the shticks?
No, I think we adequately covered it.
Okay, let's jump into favorite fashion then. Do you have any favorite fashion this week?
No.
Okay,
Do
same.
you? Okay. I do think it worth talking about some of the outfits because they're just so.
I don't have favorite fashion. I do appreciate, like, I mean, I appreciate the nod to like silk fit being like frame outfit.
Right. No,
Um,
I agree. That is nice. I actually didn't even make that connection until you said that.
mhm.
And then we also have a similar thing where she's clearly wearing one of Fran's bathrobes in the scene that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
I thought
So I
Fran's
appreciated those nods, but yeah.
yeah. I thought Fran's fashion just totally missed the mark on this in this episode.
Mhm.
Like, I did not like any of the outfits she wore. So in the first scene, she's wearing like a black suit, like a skirt and blouse, or like a button down jacket, but it has this pattern. So it's a black base with like white and red dots that sometimes overlap, sometimes don't. I didn't really care for that. But if I had to pick something, if someone put a gun to my head and was like, pick an outfit, that would be the one I'd pick. When she was serving as a juror on 2 of the 3 days, she's wearing something super, super bright. I think the first day, like when she goes and gets selected, she's wearing this like silky, like matching pants and long sleeve blouse that have yellow and purple and green and like orange or red. It's just like this like mishmash of colors. And then she wears something similar the third day, or the third day we see her as a juror. She's wearing like a sequiny skirt suit that is open at the top, and so she's wearing like a orange red turtleneck, and then it's like the suit is like neon green with like red and purple and blue. It's very, very loud, and I usually like loud in colors. I did not care for either of these.
Mhm.
Then the final like outfit we see her in as a juror, she's wearing like a zebra print, which is the most mundane of her outfits.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add to that.
All right, shall we jump to notable New Yorkers then?
Yes, I do have a quick question for you though.
Sure.
In terms of the title, did you put it under this shtick or a different shtick?
I didn't put it anywhere because I didn't think of it until now. So we can put it under here if you'd like.
Okay. So Samson.
He's a biblical character.
Yes, who famously had his hair cut by Delilah, right?
Yes. Oh, whether it was Delilah or not, that I'm unclear about. But yes, he had his power was derived from his hair.
Mhm. Yep. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and say it here. But like to me, Vincenzo, the character, is such a knockoff off of Fabio, right? The
Agreed.
long the long hair, the cover of romance novels. Um, that I think is a reference to Fabio. Who have we talked about him before or not?
I think we did.
Okay. Because yes, again, just
Yes,
he's
we
this
definitely
famous.
did. We
Okay.
did in season 2 in the episode Material Fran, where Fran goes on the date with um Timothy Simmons, I think his name was, the very, very wealthy guy who is the oldest friend of her high school friend's now husband.
Hmm.
And Maggie asked about like, does he at least have a nice body? And Fran said, yeah, imagine like, Fabio, yeah, picture his feet on Burgess Meredith, is what Fran
Okay.
said.
Okay. Yeah. So again, famous romance novel cover model with long hair. Now, when the judge walks in, he gets a big round of applause from the audience.
Yes, he does.
Can you tell us who the judge is?
I was going to ask, did you recognize him?
Not off the bat,
I didn't either.
but he is apparently well known.
Yeah, his name is Robert Urich. He's a
Mhm.
writer, producer, and actor who's known for his roles in Lonesome Dove in Vegas.
Mhm.
He only appeared in this one episode of The Nanny, which is what I know him from.
Yeah. And the thing was that I think, again, having looked up him, I think the reason he was bald was because he had cancer around that time.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm. If that lines up, I think that might be a reason why.
Did you recognize anyone else in the courtroom? Besides
In the
Fran and
court
Cece, obviously.
in the courtroom, honestly, I wasn't paying close attention to the others. Is there someone who we've seen before?
There are two people we've seen before.
Okay.
The first one is Gloria Gifford. She played the prosecutor today in today's
Mhm.
episode.
Was she a nurse before?
She was not a nurse, but close. She was the INS officer in the episode Green Card in season 3.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
So we have seen her before. We will not see her again.
Mhm.
Did you the answer is probably no, but thinking back, did you recognize the face or voice of the bailiff?
It was a very distinct voice.
Mhm.
Uh, Offhand, I can't say.
So she was played by according to our friends at IMDb, she was played by Dee Dee Rescher, who we have seen twice before. She was actually in the first episode of the series. She played Dottie. She was the woman in the bridal gown who Fran was getting saltine crackers for her morning sickness.
Oh,
She
okay.
was also in season 3 in the episode That's Midlife. She was flirting with Maxwell. And Fran told her, Dottie, get out of here. You have a fiance, like go away.
Mhm.
And we're actually going to see her. So tiny little future fun here. We are going to see her twice more. We're going to see her in season 5 at the reunion where Fran and Val go to their high school reunion. And so she is again playing Dottie there. And then we also see her in season 6 in the episode titled Maggie's Wedding. And she plays a bridal shop clerk.
Wow.
So we'll see more of her.
Cool. I put down Simon Says. Did you?
I did. I also made up my own description of it. So
Nice.
the children's game in which one player serves as Simon and issues instructions to others that they are required to obey only if prefaced with the words Simon Says.
Mhm. Nice. So Mr. Clean.
The brand and mascot owned by Procter & Gamble, known for cleaning products. The mascot is a bald man with big white bushy eyebrows and a single earring. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Gidget.
Gidget we've talked about before, but in fairness, not since I want to say season 1, but I could be mistaken. Gidget was the title character from Gidget, the little girl with big ideas, which follows a teenage girl's adventures in Malibu. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
I don't know. Did you put down Dexatrim or no?
I did. It's an over-the-counter supplement meant to help with weight loss. And that's according to our friends also at Wikipedia.
I never know how to pronounce the name of the heels. The
Manolo Blahnik.
Okay.
This is, I think, the 3rd time we've heard of them.
Yeah.
It's a family-run company that was founded in 1970. They're known for their shoes. And that's according to our friends at manoloblahnik.com. Thank you. Now I'm going to be self-conscious.
Did you put anything down about wearing white after Labor Day or no?
I did not.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, Labor Day in the US is what, the first Monday of September?
Yes.
And there's a saying like you don't wear white after Labor Day, which is why Fran said that. It screws up the timeline.
Right.
But yeah. Jimmy Hoffa?
Yep.
Yeah.
So he was an American labor leader who disappeared in 1975 and then was declared dead 7 years later. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. He was never found.
Did you put Arid Extra Dry?
I did. It's spray-on deodorant. That's according to our friends at arid.com.
Okay. Did you have anything else?
A Horse is a Horse, of course, is the theme song to Mr. Ed, which was written by Jay Livingston. And that's according to our friends at songfacts.com. Did you happen to notice the portraits in the jury room hanging on the walls?
I did not.
One was Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh.
And the other, I believe, was Sandra Day O'Connor.
Oh, okay.
So
repping the female justices.
Correct. On the U.S. Supreme Court. I just thought it notable that they were pictured in the jury room.
Nice.
And then I'm
Okay.
out.
Okay.
Oh, actually, no, I take it back. Sorry, there's one other. Laura Heitlinger played Kiki. And she's an actress, a writer, and a comic. She's apparently been a producer. So she was a co-producer and consulting producer on Will and Grace, Two Broke Girls. She also acted in Will and Grace, the originals, actually both the original and the new series, Pen 15, Must Love Dogs, and others. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Sorry, imdb.com. My mistake. Sorry, guys.
Did you figure out who played Vincenzo / Bernie?
I did not. I should have looked at that.
Because I couldn't see. Yeah, I didn't recognize him. So
yeah, I'm also very, very bad at identifying actors and actresses by their picture. He was played by Luigi Amodeo, and that's according to our friends at IMDb. He is known for things I've frankly never heard of. So he's been on The Bold and the Beautiful, Melrose Place, Caroline in the City, Apps. This is the only episode of The Nanny he is on. Yeah, and then he's been in some other foreign productions that I'm not going to try to pronounce. That's all according to our friends at IMDb.
okay. So Yiddish cop?
So just a couple. So the most important one is Fran makes the comment after Vincenzo testifies that she cut it all off. Fran's like, and that's why they don't allow female moils. A moil is the person who performs a ritual circumcision. He does not cut off a penis. It's just the foreskin. And it's part of the tradition Brit Milah, or the mitzvah of Brit Milah, which is one of the most observed mitzvot in Judaism. So even people who are not particularly religious will have their sons circumcised 8 days after birth. So that's one. And then the other one is Sylvia refers to Gracie as Mamala. That's just like adding la at the end is just like a pet name. It's a thing that's done in Yiddish. So did I miss any?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. Cool.
90s nostalgia.
The old phone that Fran calls Sylvia on while they're just sitting down at dinner.
Yep. The reference to the phone in the limo.
Mm-hmm.
But also the cordless phone too that Maggie comes into the kitchen with.
Yep. Old cars.
Indeed. And then I also mentioned that portable TV on the counter.
Correct. Agreed. That was what I was going to say next.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of technology in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
That is outdated.
Correct. And then I'm out.
Yeah. Okay. So this entire episode is based around The Thing. So we have another episode to add to our count for After the Thing. So that takes us up to
10.
Yep.
We're up to 10.
Yes. Indeed. Feature fun?
Yeah. So just because hair was such a focus of this episode, I wanted to mention a couple other hair related things we have coming. So next week, most of the plot is actually going to focus on hair because the Sheffield household gets infested with lice.
Ooh.
Yeah. Gracie comes home from school scratching her head, and Fran's like, baby, you got to stop scratching your head like that. Otherwise people think you have lice. And she's like, I do. They sent me home from school. Turns out all 3 kids and Fran have lice. Maxwell does not. And Fran comments that this is indicative of the fact that he's not spending enough time with his children. So she guilts him into like spending time with the kids, only to like beg him not to leave her alone. He leaves and then comes back very quickly because their dinner was interrupted by uninvited pests. And Fran's like, "Oh, so you ran into my parents?" And he's like, "No, lice." So and Fran's like, "You've got lice, mazel tov." So anyway, that's fun for next week. Then a couple weeks after that, we're going to go to the Tony Awards, and Fran's going to have very, very different hair. She's going to wear this white wig that frames her face. And finally, actually not finally, a couple weeks after that, when Fran serves as the muse for a angry punk rocker, she like gets dressed up in this like very punk, like sort of dominatrix-y outfit, and she has like purple streaks in her hair. It's quite a look. And then finally, I was just going to say that hair is also a big deal at the beginning of next season when Fran impersonates Bobby Fleckman, who I believe was a character that Fran Drescher played in a film. But so she reprises that role, but Fran Fine, as in the nanny, tries to impersonate Bobby Fleckman and actually locks her up in like basically like locks her up in a room, not letting her out, and tries to like see how Maxwell feels about her. It's very interesting. But the big difference between Fran and Bobby is the hair. So Bobby had very, very smooth, flat hair compared to Fran's usual bigger is better do.
So, okay, nice. So time for episode rating?
I think so. And I think it's your turn to go first.
It is my turn to go first.
Oh, thank God.
So I a little bit of struggle because of the things we talked about, right? But also like I understood what they were trying to get at. And it was nice to see Fran, like it finally clicking in Fran's mind, like what the reason could have been. But
wait,
again,
do you think that sticks? Do you think
probably not, because this is a sitcom, so you go 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Correct.
So yeah, but at least for the moment, I'm just gonna give it a 4. How about you?
Okay, you are far more generous than I am. I do not really care for this episode because it's just so outlandish. It's funny, but like it also is just like, again, it's just so ridiculous that it's totally like it makes no sense. I don't particularly enjoy watching it because I do find it distracting. I'm gonna give it a 2.5, and that 0.5 is just because of that scene with Niles and the sandwich. Otherwise, it would have gotten a 2.
Can I take mine down to like a 3.5 for now?
Of course you can.
With more room. Again, lovely listeners, we reserve the right to adjust our scores.
Correct. The scores are meaningless. So yeah, I don't enjoy this episode. I don't go out of my way to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that as talking about it, like now I really want shoestring fries. But yeah, that doesn't give the episode a boost in my book.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you wanted to discuss before we sign off for this week?
I don't think so. Do you have anything else?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 93, The Facts of Lice.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at findtimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.